treasure that I'll treasure till I die. So for now, dear, au revoir, ma belle.
Good afternoon. I'm Jordan Roth, and this is DALLÄSTHETIC podcast. Thank you for watching. We are on episode 27, and I'm sitting here with Kris Pierce, who has a show at the Mac in Dallas, on view through
May 4th,
May 4th, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the video work, and then the Mac's media room called Boiling a Ship at Sea. Is that
Boiling a Ship in the Sea.
Boiling a Ship in the Sea? Pretty amazing work.
Thanks.
How did you, well, first of all, do you consider yourself more or less a new media artist, or are you interdisciplinary? What would you say?
I mean, people always ask me what kind of work I make, and new media is like an easy bucket, I guess, to sort of like get shorthand to start to describe a little bit of it. But like, I don't think of myself in terms of like any specific genre. I mean, I feel like we're surrounded by technology, and, you know, I grew up in the 80s, so it's something that I had always grown up with, and it feels like so familiar to me. So I don't really see much difference between using technology as a medium and, you know, maybe something more traditional like painting or
You're
whatever.
using what's around you. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's how I think about it.
So you grew up using computers, I'm assuming, and playing video games, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. You know, I think like one thing that I think about a lot is like that's really interesting is like we're in a really very specific moment in time right now where I'm part of the last generation to remember there being no internet. And, you know, when the history books are written like hundreds of years from now, like that's a very defining moment.
Oh, yeah.
Like the sort of pre-internet age and the post-internet age. So I feel like, I guess we're really fortunate in some way to be part of that generation that remembers there being no internet, because we can have I think like a unique perspective on like the behavior of people sort of post-internet and pre-internet, because we sort of, we move between both of those worlds.
Yeah.
So that's something that's really interesting to me. And of course, like video games, you know, Nintendo came out in 1985, and you know, even before that, I was playing like Pac-Man and stuff at movies and that kind of thing. But yeah, when Nintendo came out, 1985, got it just like everyone else, and it became pretty obsessed with video games all through like elementary school and stuff like that. And you know, if you look at the evolution, not to jump ahead, but like if you start to look at the evolution of like video games and graphics and the way that they've started to integrate into our lives, it's been a pretty rapid evolution. I mean, you can literally look at the Super Mario game that came out on the original Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985 and compare it to what came out like 2 years ago on the Switch, Super Mario Odyssey, and it's like insanely different, and that's just in one generation's lifetime. So it's like technology is speeding up so fast, you know, in a very short period of time, you're able to sort of experience these different iterations of like advancement, you know, and have a relationship to it. So I think that's something that definitely like had a real impact on me. And if you were to tell me when I was 10 years old or whatever that I'd be able to, in 2018 or 2019, I'd be able to sit on my couch on a laptop and make, you know, something that's far more sophisticated looking than that just on a laptop, that I would never believe it. It's just like insanity.
It is. I grew up with an Apple IIe and had it into high school, which was kind of ridiculous because by
Yeah.
then using one of those printers with still had a typewriter ribbon deal.
Yeah.
And played some type of Dungeons and Dragons type game with no graphics.
Yeah, it was just like an input
Yeah.
thing where you have to like search for key, search key,
Yeah.
key, and
And then it would
eventually
be
you
like,
would get.
oh no, the harpies are coming.
Yeah, you'd get to something that would. Yeah, I remember all that. Played all that stuff.
Trading gold and I don't know. And I got a Nintendo kind of late in the game, but I've never really gotten into the video game world. But I know that the the internet with all of its, you've got just everything. You have an identity now for different
Right.
websites, like even just to buy stuff.
Yeah.
You've got to create like a username, and it just gets weird. One thing that I found interesting that I don't know much about is like this, is it Twitch or something?
Video game streaming.
Yeah, so you've
Twitch,
got
yeah.
entire populations
Yeah.
of like probably millions of people that have like these lives playing video games and totally disparate from their real lives.
Yeah.
Do you touch on any of that type of thing?
I mean, in some ways, a lot of those ideas I would say do parlay into a lot of the work that I make, just because most of the work that I've been making over the past like 3 or 4 years is in one way or another related to identity and virtual space, and this sort of in betweenness that we're caught in, at the moment, where we have our physical identity, which is obviously, like our biological analog identity, and then the digital identity started to develop as the technology became more and more sophisticated on the internet, and that would include, like social media profiles, online avatars, maybe characters in games that you play a lot that you start to develop personality traits for. Well,
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the ways that our physical self is projected into our virtual self, and
Yeah.
the ways that there's a sort of exchange back and forth between those relationships. That's something that I'm personally interested in, and online streaming definitely has a place in it, just because there's social dynamics that enter into the conversation when someone is investing so much of their time in like a virtual space or a virtual character or something. So yeah, I think it definitely, it's part of the conversation that's happening in digital space.
So I wonder, like, when people started creating avatars, is that when it kind of like things kind of jumped into this weird realm because all of a sudden you're this cartoon?
I think, I mean, I don't know necessarily that it would be avatars. I think it probably started earlier than that to some degree, when people were able to assume an identity on like BBS, like bulletin boards and stuff, or IRC channels. Like, it's really this layer of technology between our real identity and our virtual identity. And when we're able to control that in one way or another, we're able to project whatever personality or identity we want onto it. And I think that as things have become more sophisticated and image creation or avatars, or just how we present ourselves or edit ourselves on social media channels, such as Instagram, stuff like that, that's when we're really starting to confuse where our consciousness lies. So,
Do you think that gets dangerous?
I mean, yeah, it definitely does get dangerous. I'm not one to, I guess, make social judgments through my work or anything like that. But whenever someone can, one of two things: either assume the identity of something that's false in an effort to defraud or trick or whatever. That's obviously a dangerous thing, but there's kind of a flip side to it, where people unknowingly start to become so invested in their identity online that they don't, or their identity in virtual space rather than just saying online, like they start to become so invested in that they allow it to have real consequences or an effect on their physical world, which is can be even related to body identity, things like that. So,
And that's kind of what I was thinking about. Yeah.
yeah, so the lines are starting to become more and more blurred each year, and these relationships are starting to merge into kind of a single thing, or maybe they won't, but this is something that I'm personally interested in.
And then
the
with
work that I'm making.
virtual intelligence or artificial intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
you hear about the potential for creating
Mm-hmm.
a duplicate identity, more or less.
Yeah.
That's kind of a strange idea, that another one of you could be living in a virtual world and
Right.
you don't have any.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, kind of the big thing over the past 3 or 4 years, and it's sort of ramped up quite a bit in the past year or two, is machine learning, like NVIDIA, which develops a lot of like the graphics cards and stuff that's used in gaming. These graphics cards are used in conjunction with machine learning and artificial intelligence, where you teach, you're essentially training a artificial machine, or you're training a machine to start to develop and create things based on images that you sort of input into it. So a lot of what's been happening lately is it can actually generate hyper-realistic photography of people that look real, but they're completely computer-generated people. It's not like
Wow.
Photoshop is photoshopping eyes and faces together. It's like the computer has an understanding about what it takes to generate an image of a human being.
Wow.
And it can output these things, and you could never ever tell
Randomly.
the difference, just randomly.
Oh my gosh.
There's actually a website, I think it's called thispersondoesnotexist.com or something like that. And you can actually, you go to it and it has an image, a machine learning, like AI generated image of a person, but it's not really a person. It's just generated by the computer, and you can just refresh it and a new one will come up. And you would never ever be able to distinguish that is not like a real person. So the consequences of that, one of the consequences of that, or something that is interesting to think about in terms of an artist's perspective, or my perspective, is that these things are static images at this point, but there has been a lot of development that's happened over the past few years, where videos can be created using artificial people that you can't distinguish. An actor's performance can be switched for anyone else.
Wow.
So you can actually generate things. For instance, you could take a performance on Saturday Night Live, or a performance in a studio by an actor, and use machine learning to generate, say, like the president's face, or a global politician's face, or something on it. And then when you place that in a virtual context, or a sort of like an unpoliced context like the internet, people don't understand what's real and what's fake.
Yeah.
So this sort of idea, we have a very surfacey idea of what fake news is at this point, but it's like, if we have, computers all over the world generating indistinguishable video content of political leaders doing things that they never did, social or cultural influencers doing videos of things that they never did, and we don't have any system in place to regulate or create awareness about what's real and what's fake, then that creates real issues in the physical world.
Oh yeah. I mean, you'll have to some point maybe forensically unpack some of these videos to find out what really what's really going on.
Yeah, and there was like a big thing last year. There was a subreddit called Deep Fakes, which I think has since been removed from Reddit, but a lot of people were creating like pornography using existing videos, but they were teaching a machine to apply like celebrity faces and stuff to it. And it was getting kind of freaky, indistinguishable, and a lot of sort of regulations were having to pop up in how we regulate this, or what's a real person. This isn't a real person, but it feels too real for us to not be uncomfortable with it. So that's just one of the one of the side effects of the way that this technology is getting like better and better and
Yeah.
better.
And then kind of a side topic, you know, you keep reading about machines are going to be making art and whatnot. Do you think that, can a machine ever become intuitive like an artist, or really truly create? Do you think that that would ever happen?
I mean, I don't think that I'm in a position to answer that
Yeah.
question, honestly,
It just
but
doesn't seem like it.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that just maybe if you're applying a very like generalized definition to what art is,
Yeah, yeah.
but you know, if we widen the scope of what we consider to be art, like, does it really? It's maybe a new way of thinking about, does the artist's hand really matter in the end? You know,
Right.
if what is the separation between the artist and the product? You know, if the experience of art is most valuable when it's the work and the person that's having a relationship with it, or a dialogue between it, maybe it doesn't matter if it's created by a machine, as long as
Yeah.
the relationship is still there. I don't know. That's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, something I've wondered about. So speaking of the artist's hand, you've got an interesting way of building your work, of making your videos. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it kind of depends on which video. A lot of the work that I've been making over the past few years is used like video game engines, which for people that might not know, that's basically I guess like the architecture or the toolkit that brings everything together that comprises a video game. So it's a way of taking 3D models and graphics and graphic design and user interface design and creating interactivity through code, and then placing cameras and interactivity and inside of the game engine to create a game. But so a lot of the tools that I use, and I use a lot of weird kind of bootleg tools too that I find on forums, like Japanese like video game forums and stuff like that. But the two primary ones, which is what most sort of hobbyists would use, and a lot of professional studios too, is like Unreal Engine and Unity. And I kind of go back and forth between them, just depending on like what type of project I'm working on. But I don't necessarily use them in a super interactive way that they are with games. Like I use them more in the way that a director would use them.
Yeah.
Where I create scenes, I have actors, and I sort of develop the scenes or the shots like inside of the game engine. And part of the reason that I do that, I have done several videos using, I guess, traditional 3D software that like animated features and short films and stuff would be made in, and that would be Maya, which is the primary one that I use. But the difference between something like Maya and Unreal Engine or Unity is that the game engines do real-time rendering, so you don't necessarily have to wait for an image to be generated frame by frame in a game engine the same way you would in traditional like 3D software. So that's something that allows me to work faster than I would have in the past, and it removes some of the barrier that there was before, which I think is a positive thing, because I like to be able to use whatever it is that I'm using without any sort of like period of waiting or having to kind of like allow the software to catch up. And the game engines really, I guess, provide a platform for that. So that's kind of why I've moved more into using those as a tool.
And when you're making like a video piece with characters and whatnot, I guess using the game engine, you're able to maybe control the speed a little bit better, or kind of like how they move, or some type of
honestly, not really.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of depends how you work inside of it. I mean, the thing with like something like Maya is there is a lot more flexibility and depth in terms of like character animation and stuff like that. But that's not something that I necessarily have to lean on in the type of work that I'm making. And those two pieces of software are interchangeable in some ways. So anything that you're working on in Maya, to some degree, you can kind of bring it into one of the game engines. But in terms of real-time physics, the game engine is like much faster, much lower barrier for creating something. And I think that there's at least an aesthetic attached to it right now that I'm interested in capturing as an artist, because a lot of times I think of my work in terms of the moment, like what's happening at the moment. And, you know, if I have an ability to capture sort of a marker in time, in terms of aesthetic or in terms of the limitations of the technology, then that's something that I'm interested in doing, because I think that, at least for me, the type of art that I'm interested in is sort of a reflection of what's surrounding us
at a given time.
At any given time. So that's something I'm conscious of, and I try to bring that in, let that enter into the work naturally.
And music is a big deal for you, in at least this current piece at the Mac. How did that come to play?
You know, like the better part of my, probably starting at 14, I started playing guitar and started getting into playing in bands and stuff with all my friends and getting into the music scene and that whole thing. And that was like a really big part of my life up until maybe when I was 26. I played in a bunch of different bands and like toured all over the country and you know, recorded a bunch of records and stuff like that. So music has always been a big part of my life. And I think that it's just natural that in some ways the language of music is something that enters into the work that I make. I think it's not necessarily a conscious thing. It's just such a big part of my life, and it's just the language of what makes the language of like the world around us. And I find it like to be a really interesting tool for communicating certain things like within the work. Plus, you know, the way that I approach music, it varies from video to video. Like in the piece at the Mac, it's obviously more of like a mixtape, like a 40-minute mixtape that serves to recontextualize the video each time it loops. And that's done in like a very conscious way. The video is designed to, I guess, have a different type of relationship with the music depending on which music is playing at the time. And, you know, I thought it was, music is something that seems to be omnipresent, at least for myself. And it seemed like an interesting way for something that feels omnipresent to enter into the space and recontextualize the work. So I wanted to create a similar environment that I work in, that I feel like we exist in to some large degree. You know, it's like, I know myself and most people, if they're working on a computer, if they're doing something, they usually have music playing. So the music has the ability to you know, have an effect on what it is that you're doing at the time.
And it totally does recontextualize it. I've walked in, you know, multiple times over the last couple weeks, and it's just a different vibe, different mood. You know, every time. We've got a short clip that has some sound that we can put on here.
On high will return here to the sky and will banish the pain and the sorrow.
So why did you choose that particular clip?
The particular clip or the actual music?
Well, this particular clip that you sent.
You know what? I didn't put much thought into the
Okay.
clip that I pulled. The video is not a super lengthy video, but something about the juxtaposition between the types of imagery or the aesthetic of the character, or like the sort of the idea of the soldier, juxtaposed like in the context of something so ordinary and American as like a McDonald's, and the conflict that was sort of enter into that in like a humorous way. That was, I don't know. I just find that those type of dynamics really interesting, because it seems to be. I don't want to say that it seems to be uniquely American, but this sort of juxtaposition between those types of juxtaposition seems to feel American to me.
Well, and it's just you feel like that soldier, sometimes,
Right.
He's so exasperated, and is there a plot line, would you say, to this piece?
I mean, I think that for me, there is. And I think if you would talk to other people about it, I think that they would say, yeah, there's a plot line. I've talked to a bunch of people about it, and I'm like, what is this? Like, what are you getting out of this? Are you picking up on any of the relationships that I'm sort of injecting into the video? And a lot of people pick up on it, and the piece is not designed to be decoded in the same way. And it's certainly not designed to be decoded in the same way in terms of the music is a component that recontextualizes the video.
Yeah.
So I think that I understand the mechanics of designing a plot in a video, just because I've done it for so long, like that you can set up familiar triggers inside of a system, and it allows people to start to connect the visuals that they're seeing along with the music in ways that feel familiar and make sense, because that's what we're inclined to do. We're inclined to decode, connect the dots, especially in a format like this. We understand how a linear narrative is supposed to play out in a video like this. So, I'm interested in the way that people are starting to put that together on their own, and it's certainly designed in there. So,
and the music so helps in
right.
kind of creating that narrative.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it feels really nostalgic. Other times it's aggressive. It's that's really interesting.
Yeah. Thanks.
So what is it you're working on now?
Well, right now I'm working on stuff for a show that's opening in September at the Old Jail Art Center in Albany.
Yeah.
So I'm working on a lot of stuff for that. It's the Cell series, which I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a really cool thing that they do, but the museum is built around an existing jail that was constructed in the late 19th century and actually used, and has a very interesting and loaded history attached to it. But it's a collecting museum that is sort of extended beyond the jail cell space, but they still invite artists to come in and do exhibitions in the space. So it's really interesting relationship between the work and the space, and there's a lot of ideas relating to the type of work that I'm interested in that connect in ways that I think that I find interesting. So I'm mainly working on stuff for that at this point.
Is it a solo show?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Awesome. So the Cell series, there's two sort of cells involved in it. So it's going to be several new pieces, a large multi-channel video piece, and then maybe another video and some other work that kind of comes out of it. But that's what I'm working on at this point.
So we've got a little example of that here as well.
Yeah, the thing that I actually sent is not going to be in that show, but it's a piece that like one of the most recent pieces that I finished that I actually haven't shown yet. But I don't know if you're planning on showing that piece. But it's basically the images are called together from, I guess, game glitches.
Yeah.
Glitches from inside, like specifically in this video, like sports games, like FIFA and like a Madden game and stuff like that. And it's sort of, I mean, I won't completely decode the video, but it's it's a moment where the technology starts to reveal itself
Yeah.
inside of system that's, I guess, moonlighting as reality. So these sports games have gotten pretty freaking realistic, like at this point. You know, sometimes I don't play like a lot of Xbox type of games or PlayStation and stuff like that. So I don't have a lot of familiarity with some of these really new sports games. But once I started to get like interested in them and started working on this piece, it's like insane how good the graphics have gotten on these things. But so the video is really exploring this idea, like I said, where the technology starts to reveal itself, because as time progresses, things are going to get better and better and more flawless, and you're going to really start to have a hard time distinguishing what's real, what's motion captured, what's animated, what's not real, you know, what's a 3D digital scan of a person as opposed to being modeled by a guy in a cubicle. So like I said earlier, I'm interested in capturing things that are of this time.
Yeah.
And that piece is a way to explore some of those ideas, you know, because it's going to get to a point to where you can't explore it in the same way that you can now.
It'll be so seamless.
It'll be, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So let's take a look at that. So in making that video, were you essentially playing video games and just waiting for things to happen, or?
That stuff is all sourced from YouTube channels.
Okay.
It's like a weird thing where, you know, people capture them and post them up kind of as like a, you know, check this out, that kind of thing. But the piece that I created it has a more sinister feel than I think that they would traditionally, you know, compared to what you would find on YouTube or something like that, which, you know, I kind of like, because in some ways we attach a physical persona to these virtual avatars, and a lot of times, especially in the sports games, they're all based on real athletes.
Yeah.
And inside of this system, inside this game system or this technology-based system, they become mutilated in very like bizarre / like funny ways.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to amplify the sinister nature of these often sort of funny humorous
It's pretty
things.
wild.
Yeah. Thanks.
So so you've got the show coming up at the Old Jail Center in September, and that's in Albany, that's a little west of Abilene, I think. It's like a little bit.
Yeah, it's just kind of a little bit northwest of Mineral Wells, so
Okay.
it's not too far. It's about from Dallas. I think it's maybe 3 hours, something like that.
Okay. Well, hopefully people will go out and see that. But in the meantime, his show is on view at the Mac, and it's also with Al Farrow and Sandow Burke. The 3 shows work so well together. And the Mac is in the Cedars next door to Road to Art. Highly recommend spending some time with the video. Go in, watch the video, peruse the exhibition, go back in and watch the video, I would say. But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.
I appreciate it.
You bet.